The PlayStation has a lot of games, so many in fact, that the majority of its library often falls for the cracks for most people. The PlayStation in the 90s and early 2000s in gaming, I feel in general, was the best time for experimentation and artistic works to shine, due to lower development costs and graphics as a whole, which is why I'm always fascinated with the things that aren't necessarily brought up in discussions of what was on what console. So I thought it'd be a fun time to check out some games that you may or may not know that made its home on the PlayStation 1. Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere first came on my radar about a year or so ago. Man, it's been a game I've been looking forward to checking out sometime. I don't know when, but sometime. And that time is now, I guess. Been a pretty casual fan of the Ace Combat series for a while. I played Ace Combat 7 back in 2020, and I played a bit of Ace Combat 4 as well. But Ace Combat 3 just looks so cool and stylistic. I would honestly say that for its time, Ace Combat 3 is probably the most ambitious game in the series even now. Forgoes a lot of what the other Ace Combat games do entirely for a much more futuristic sort of dark future conflict, rather than the much more modern, in air quotes, stories the later games tell. Set in 2040 and the furthest in the series timeline, Ace Combat 3 tells the story of the three-sided corporate war between the two largest mega corporations in the world, General Resource and Newcom, with Upio, a United Nations peacekeeping task force, and you, the player, stuck in the middle of the growing corporate war. Along with a secret fourth faction called Ouroboros, which is a cabal made up of General Resource and Newcom people that see transcending the physical body as the next step for humanity. The game is still set in Yusha, one of the main fictional places in the Ace Combat series, but the actual Yushan government is practically no more in terms of influence and power. Corporations have grown so powerful and influential that they have eclipsed the government in terms of control, and most of the world is governed by them, not the actual government. Yusha is said now as a formality for the past and for the land people are on, rather than a word to define a civilization. Most soldiers now work for said mega corporations as hired guns rather than a part of a unified army that defends a nation. Corporations like General Resource and Newcom have a grip on pretty much all factors of life, including cities, housing, food, education, science, and the list goes on and on. And I mean, it's not a complete fantasy in a video game, as in our own world, certain companies and even individual people hold so much wealth and power, but it's almost scary. There's also the Electrosphere itself, a fictional enhanced version of the internet that exists as a dimension between dream and reality, which allows users to upload their consciousness directly into the web, which gives rise to a more transhumanistic future becoming more and more popular within the world. Like with the people found in Ouroboros, for example. Those things aside, another key part to Ace Combat 3 is its depth of player choice that it offers, with 5 individual endings and a secret true 6th ending when all the base 5 are uncovered. How that's decided is with the branching paths given to you during missions. An example being in Mission 4, Paper Tiger. After an argument with General Resources' ace pilot Dijin about Upio's representative Gabriel Clarkson attempting to broker a ceasefire between General Resources and Newcom, Dijin decides to give up on being friendly with Upio, and gives you a decision to defect to General Resources and join Dijin, or stay with your friends in Upio. Now if you join Dijin and defect, you completely abandon the Upio path and are put onto the General Resources pathway, where more diverging choices await. But then say if you do choose to stay with Upio, another choice will be presented later down the line, for if you want to defect with Representative Clarkson to Newcom. Basically every choice that you make changes the pathway in some way, shape, or form for what ending you're gonna get. In my one playthrough for this little mini review, I went with Clarkson to Newcom and it drastically changed the game, with the introduction of characters like Cynthia, the older sister of one of your friends in Upio who defects with you to Newcom, whose whole shtick is to explore the Electrosphere and the eventual life without a physical body. Cynthia is also one of the characters who offers you a chance later down the line to join Ouroboros with her, after a few missions that you do when you're aligned with Newcom. A lot of these choices play with morality, and I like that they do genuinely have consequences that play into the game's world itself. It definitely is the most anime Ace Combat game, I guess you could say, especially with characters like Reina, who has a made-up disease that makes her completely allergic to sunlight, and the fact that she reminds me a lot of someone like Rei from Evangelion. But I love that it ditches the pseudo-realism to dive deep into the realm of science fiction, and focus on the concept of the internet that only mid to late 90s anime could really do. And the game's just doused in all that late 90s Y2K aesthetic. I really like the aesthetic and art style that Electrosphere goes for. It's so poppy and clean, it's just really cool. For being set in a pretty dark and bleak future, it still certainly kept that sense of colorful optimism that the late 90s had for the turn of the century. Minus the actual, Y2K problem psychosis people had at the time. The soundtrack as well is really cool, with a lot of synthy ambient sort of stuff. It reminds me a bit of music by Aphex Twin and the like. Unlike a lot of other games in this video, Ace Combat 3 is available officially outside Japan, except they completely gutted it, taking out all the story of the characters, dropped the level count from 50 to 32, and removed all the branching pathways for a generic flight sim with a completely paper-thin story. The reason as to why Namco made this giant disparity between versions is because they just didn't have the budget to warrant an English version of the complete game after AC3 failed to sell 1 million copies in Japan. The stuff I've been showing is all from the great English patch that came out only a couple years ago, that makes all of Ace Combat 3 playable in English, which is awesome. As for the gameplay, I mean, it's Ace Combat, and it isn't a bad thing at all. I was generally surprised with how well the game controlled and played, for how early an entry it was in the series. Pretty much everything I did in Ace Combat 7 was present in Ace Combat 3 minus the upgrade tree, which is kinda crazy for a 20-year gap between them. Obviously, because it's a PS1 game, the environments are very low polygonal. And again, that isn't really a bad thing. I mean, it's from 1998, dude. For most of the time, you're gonna be thousands of feet in the air, so it doesn't really matter. The city sections at night can still be atmospheric and moody, full of its futuristic metropolitan-looking future city skylines. I'm a sucker for late 90s anime modern-looking cities, they all look so stylish. It's pretty clear that upon a first playthrough you don't know what the fuck is going on, and the game ends rather suddenly, but I think that's the entire point of it. Thus upon doing more and more of the routes that the game offers, every piece of the story will come together to what it all eventually really means. It makes me kinda sad that the West just never got this version of the game until recently. But I'm glad we have it now, it's really ambitious, for what it is. Tokyo Majin Gakuen Kenpucho, or Tokyo Wizard Academy Blade Guild book in English, is a visual novel-esque turn-based strategy RPG released for the PS1 in 1998. Tokyo Majin, although incredibly unpopular here in the West, was a somewhat successful franchise of games in Japan. Pretty much nothing has crossed over here aside for an anime adaptation of the series in 2007, a PS Vita game that nobody played, and a spin-off of Tokyo Majin Gakuen called Kowloon High School Chronicle, an even stranger PS2 game that blends Japanese school life, visual novel segments, dungeon crawling in a first-person perspective through an Egyptian-esque tomb, and a smooth, cool jazz soundtrack all into one. However, Tokyo Majin Gakuen Kenpucho started this series on the PS1, had a second game set in ancient Japan as a prequel to Kenpucho, and strangely enough had a remake of it on the DS in 2008, but also had a third mainline game teased around that time as well but just never came out, I guess. To be completely straight up with you, I'm not going to say Tokyo Majin Gakuen Kenpucho every time I refer to it, so I'm just going to say Tokyo Majin, and whenever I say that I'm pretty much, for the most part, only going to be referring to the first game in the series. I also have a physical copy of Tokyo Majin as well, which I bought from a game store out of curiosity, but to capture game footage I just used DuckStation. Probably something you'd notice right off the bat is that this game is only in Japanese, there isn't a fan translation or anything to speak of. Which I don't know, maybe the Western Tokyo Majin Gakuen fandom is dying on the floor to play this one, all like 5 of them. But how I got around it was just pointing my phone to the monitor with Google Translate, and although a little bit annoying, it actually worked, for the most part. To be clear though, if I get something wrong, there's a good chance it's because of the translator. Some things like certain words or sayings I kinda freaked out with, but I was able to understand, for the most part, what was happening. It was like I was playing White Illumination again, in more ways than one. Anyways, after a strange cold open with a mysterious red-clothed man killing some school delinquents in a shrine, the game starts in the spring of 1998 in Tokyo. You're a new transfer student to Megami Academy and your homeroom teacher, Mrs. Maria, introduces you to your new classmates. The player's canon name is whatever this is, but I took some liberties choosing my own name. For choosing your first name and last name, your nickname, your birthday, which region of Japan you were born in, and your blood type, you're finally able to sit back down. Miss Maria refers you to sit down next to the class representative, the gentle and kind Misato. After Misato introduces herself to you, you're prompted to respond back to her with an emotion. One of the gimmicks of Tokyo Majin is a response system that it gives you to talk and respond to questions the characters give you. You have 8 emotions you can respond with, and depending on the question and the character's personality, they'll respond accordingly to what you've just said. On the left side of your controller on your D-pad are the negative emotions you can respond with. Going from clockwise order are worried, cold, sadness, and angry. And the ones represented on the right of the controller are the positive ones, shown on the PS1 buttons. Going from clockwise again, being love, friend, same, which I think just means indifference, and finally joy. To be honest with you, I don't know Japanese at all, so to remind myself I wrote down the 8 emotions in English in my notebook, and use that for my time playing the game. And you're timed on this, by the way, so if your translator fucks up and you don't know what they just said, you either gotta guess on the context you know already from the situation, or or just press something positive and hope to God that it works out. Pressing joy, so the square button, is usually always the safest option when talking to your friends or an acquaintance. So when Misato introduces herself to you, you just gotta respond with either the joy button or friend button to express your gratitude to her. Or another example being when one of your other classmates, Komaki, asks you if you find her pretty, you can respond negatively and she just laughs it off. It all depends on who the person is, which I think is a pretty cool mechanic. Though I'm pretty sure a lot of this just plays into how the player wants to define their character. After class is over for the day, the cast of characters start to introduce themselves. There's a class representative Misato, who I mentioned before, Kyoichi, an easygoing member of the Kendo Club, who just recently transferred in as well, the hot-headed and headstrong Komaki, the uptight and by-the-books leader and only member of the newspaper club, Kyoko, who actually makes papers for you to read as the game goes on. Finally Daigo, the principled but martial arts obsessed captain of the wrestling team at Megami High. After Kyoichi gives you a tour of the school, including meeting characters like Kyoko and the school's strange occult-obsessed fortune teller, Uramitsu, he cuts loose from you for the time being, and after a brief conversation with Kyoko, this guy called Sakuma starts harassing you for being the new guy on campus. Him and Kyoko argue back and forth until he's pushed to the edge and starts a fight with you outside his school. Kyoichi hears all this, jumps down from the tree that I guess he was napping in. The fight breaks out between you two and Sakuma's goons. The combat system is very akin to stuff like Final Fantasy Tactics or Sakura Wars, where you're in an isometric 3D space and can move and position your units to your liking. It took me a little bit to get my bearings with all the option boxes full of stuff I couldn't read, but I got the hang of it after a few minutes. A lot of the gameplay revolves around the energy points that you and your teammates have every turn. How many points you have dictates all that you can do in a turn. So for example, say if you have 17 points, you can spend 10 of those points moving and positioning yourself to your liking. And the remaining 7 points can go to an attack that costs that much. There's not a ton to do with the few extra remaining points, so you can always just end your turn if you really want to. However, if you use someone like Komaki who's an archer, she has a really generous tile range for what she can hit, so you can do multiple attacks for characters like her as long as the points allow it. But for a lot of the more physical characters like the player character, Kyoichi and Daigo, you're pretty much going to be attacking once per turn unless the enemy is like right there in front of you. And Misato is also there too. She has healing powers, that's all she really does. There's also the training system which lets you train your units in something specific before the next battle, like boosting certain stats with a talk option to have an optional little conversation with them. But to be honest, I would focus all the opportunities you get with the training segments to build them to what you want. As you know, most of the game is just characters talking to each other. After dealing with Sakuma's goons and getting yourself orientated with Megami High, the story quickly unfolds into the occult underbelly in Tokyo that begins to poke its head out once the main characters all realize they've just now awakened to these strange powers that lay dormant inside them. Especially Misato, who keeps on having more and more strange feelings relating to the magic she can cast as the days go on. The story of Majin is very episodic in nature. Every new chapter is essentially a self-contained little adventure in itself, like exploring a haunted section of the school, going to a cherry blossom festival with your friends which ends up being crashed by a zombie business guy, controlled by the legendary sword Masamune, a guy who thinks he's chosen by God as the world's savior who can control murderous crows who wreak havoc in Shibuya, and a student from another school with the power to visit and trap people in their dreams who has an unhealthy obsession with Misato. A lot of the game's story while I was playing it reminded me of a shonen manga or something like that, especially the early chapters of something like Yu Yu Hakusho. The story goes much more in depth than what I described. Like in chapter 5, the dream one that I mentioned before with the weird kid, Misato suddenly falls into a coma in class and you take her to Uramitsu to see if she's under a spell, and she refers you to an occult doctor who for some reason runs a giant ecology clinic, who Kyoichi is scared of because she's fat I guess, who sends you out to the park with her assistant in training who can see ghosts to find the weird dream guy, and his alt-girl companion that knocks her out with sleeping gas and puts you in a dream where you have to fight him. And that's just chapter 5 bro, there's like 20 free chapters in this game dude. I also find it cool as well how, like other visual novels of its era, it uses real-world photos as its backgrounds, which gives it a really unique kind of vibe to it. It's also just cool that it captures mid to late 90s Tokyo. It's an aesthetic that I really like, the blend of the real world with the game itself. There's pretty much nothing covering this game in the West besides for a couple blogs, so this is another game that might make for a cool video in the future. No promises though. I've had a weird fascination with Ehrgeiz God Bless the Ring for years. I'd see it on Square's Wikipedia page of published games by them, and something always just looked strange about it. It's a 3D fully directional fighter. It isn't 2D or 2.5D, the entire arena is playable, with weighty wrestling style moves worked in, which makes it similar to something like maybe Power Stone or Soul Calibur, but it just doesn't hit the mark for almost anything. For starters, the cover art just looks fake. It looks like a bootleg of itself. You got all these lesser variant versions of other fighting game characters with Cloud from FF7 snuck there in the background. It looks like a bootleg game you would see in a Middle Eastern country or something. Ehrgeiz is kind of a light continuation of the Tobal games, Dream Factory. The developers of Ehrgeiz were doing a little bit before, which were also with Square. Not in the same sense of it being from the same series, but as a way to sell another game. If Cloud looked weird being next to these random characters, then yeah, you'd be right. Tobal in itself was a completely made game that came bundled with a playable demo of FF7, which caused it to spike in sales for said demo. And it was kind of the only reason why most people even bought this thing in the first place, was for a playable demo of another game entirely, not for the actual game on the cover. This time around, for Ehrgeiz, in order to sell the game and make sure it had a chance of being financially successful, they brought over FF7 characters into the roster, putting the floodgate for Final Fantasy VII characters, with 6 in total, with Cloud, Tifa, and Sephiroth as part of the main roster, and the secret characters Vincent, Yuffie, and oddly enough, Zack of all characters. Probably because he was easy to make and was just a Cloud reskin. The way Final Fantasy VII is in this game is like an infectious parasite lurching onto its host. I say that so harshly because I'm just kinda tired of the FF7 glaze I've seen for a lot of my life. I'm just gonna say it, I think Final Fantasy VIII's better. Yeah, I said it. The actual cast of Ehrgeiz, being 8 playable characters with 2 secret characters, have absolutely nothing to do with Final Fantasy VII in the slightest. A lot of their designs are alright at best. Some of the ones I like being, oh god, her name is hard to say with my stutter. Yo-Yo Yoko, a yo-yo wielding police officer. Sasuke, who is quite literally just a cool ninja. And Lee, who's a Kenpo master. Yeah, he's just a cool middle-aged guy, I don't know. There's also no real story to speak of, which I know can be forgiven as it's a fighting game. But whenever you complete a character's path in arcade mode, you get a quick like FMV cutscene that has little to do with anything, even with the character you're playing as. Aside for showing them do a random thing that was in the opening cutscene, and you're left thinking, alright, and moving on with your day. Besides for the arcade mode and a few simple mini-games, there's also a dungeon crawler mode that just seems like its own game as well. Yeah, aside from having a Temu fighting game with FF7 stapled onto it, you also get a fucking Temu McDonald's Happy Meal toy dungeon crawler as well, with absolutely zero production value aside for a voiced text scroll on the history of the world before getting into the game. The text scroll basically just surmounting to archaeologist Koji and his assistant Claire, trying to uncover the secret to immortality, but upon exploring the ruins to where the key to immortality supposedly is, they're transported to an alternate world where they gotta descend the Forbidden Dungeon to get back to the world they came from. However, said alternate world is literally just a hub island, with no aesthetic or theming to it whatsoever aside for Fantasy Island. And it basically just serves as a place to house vendors to buy from. The plot's incredibly paper thin, so much so that it barely exists at all. It basically just exists to explain why there even is a dungeon crawler mode in a fighting game in the first place. I didn't finish the dungeon myself, but it wasn't that bad in all honesty. It's probably the best part about Ehrgeiz, which is kinda sad that a side mode that is basically no relation to anything else in the game is the best part of it, but I digress. It's fun in the sense of it being a no thinking turn your brain off style of fun. It does have an interesting way of punishment for dying in the dungeon. Say if you were to die in the dungeon as Koji, you would respawn as Claire with whatever she has in her inventory, and it's up to you to recover Koji, and all the items that he dropped where he died. And say if you fail and you die as Claire, it's game over for your progress. Unless you know you saved, it's not that punishing. I know I kind of glossed over the actual fighting game mechanics of Ehrgeiz, and from what I said about the game up to this point, it comes across as a little harsh sounding. And that's probably because I'm just not the best at fighting games myself. There's probably some mechanics in the game that I just don't get, because of my inexperience with the genre. Whenever I play a fighting game, my brain can't react quickly enough, and I just end up pressing stuff that I think will work. Another part is probably because for my time checking the game out, I just played against bots, which wasn't incredibly fun. Because I mean, thinking on it, the whole appeal of fighting games themselves is the competitive and social aspect of them. It's the fun that you can have with other people in the same room as you are online. I just don't want to sound like a hater on Ehrgeiz, it's not that bad. It's an interesting little Squaresoft oddity. I'm just happy that I finally checked out what Ehrgeiz was actually about. Linda Cubed is a very strange RPG on the PlayStation's library, and it's been something that's been talked about a lot in the more obscure RPG circles. Especially a lot more now as a really good fan patch came out a couple years ago for it. Originally released for the TurboGrafx 16 of all consoles and later ported to the PlayStation with updated graphics, fully animated cutscenes, and voice acting, along with very striking art and character design by the talented artist Tatsuyuki Tanaka, otherwise known by his pen name Cannabis. Linda Cubed goes for a very strange blend of monster collecting, surreal storytelling, exploration, turn-based combat, and the story of Noah's Ark all running on a timer of 8 years. It starts in 1991 and is forced to end by 1999. Basically the story is on the planet Neo Kenya, a humongous asteroid nicknamed by the people the Grim Reapers fated to crash down onto the planet and eradicate all life in an instant. So naturally, God himself hurls a personal signed message on a giant stone tablet down to the people of Neo Kenya, telling them to gather 2 of every kind of animal on the planet, and then send them out on the ark he has given humanity into space to repopulate whatever place mankind has chosen as its next home. However, the ark can only be operated by a chosen man and woman. So while the Rangers, basically the acting peacekeepers of Neo Kenya, are making preparations for their planetary migration off the planet, they select Ken, the player character, to sign himself up to being the male handler of the ark, with the female handler being Linda, his kind of energetic, quirky childhood friend. And with the creepy, almost foreboding hand pact they make on the ark, the 2 are bound together as a couple to bring and preserve life out of Neo Kenya. Something to note about Linda is that she's also half Beastian, the Beastians being the original people of Neo Kenya before the humans came. Her mother's Beastian while her father's human, which is kinda why the Beastian people have crazy blue and green hair, while the humans have natural hair you'd see every day. Pretty much just after making the pact on the ark, things are put into almost immediate jeopardy when Linda loses her memories and her whole entire village, including her mom, goes missing with her as the sole survivor. Along with the introduction of a strange year-round Christmas and Santa-themed pharmaceutical group, with their most prominent member being Ken's apparent incredibly jealous and murderous long-lost identical twin brother, named Neck. No, I'm not making this up. It's just fucking Ken spelled backwards. Put a pin in all this for later. Now the reason as to why it's called Linda Cubed is because it has 3 scenarios you can play through, all with increasing levels of animals you have to catch before the meteor hits. The scenarios being Scenario A, Merry Christmas with 30 animals, Scenario B, Happy Child with 50 animals, and finally Scenario C, Astro Arc with 100 animals you gotta catch. Though in actuality it's more like 120 because the PlayStation version actually adds 20 more to the roster. But for this segment I only played the first scenario, Merry Christmas, for this little review. I honestly may or may not make a full video on this game too, because I haven't really played a game that's like Linda Cubed really, so I'm gonna hold off on the more in-depth details for a full video. But yeah, I just did the first scenario. The main gameplay loop of Linda Cubed is the animal gathering, where you have to beat the animal into submission, but not too hard or the game tells you their guts splattered everywhere and they're dead. If you manage to capture them, which isn't too hard if you don't like annihilate them, you can bring them into the ark that God gave you to log them into this really strange, like, flesh organ terminal thing, to store them in safekeeping for when the ark needs to launch off in Neo Kenya. With Linda immediately being in the fucking hospital with dementia or some shit, Ken is apparently the only one who can do this. So you don't have normal conventional party members to help you out. To replace this, you have hunting dogs that can join you in place of humans. You get your first dog, Hero, right as you leave your house, so it's pretty hard to miss. The dogs that join you act on their own, but they only pretty much attack. So they basically just serve as added damage per turn. You can also capture or buy wild dogs from around Neo Kenya, and then tame them to be one of your party members as well. For Ken himself, it's your pretty standard RPG affair. You have weapons you can buy or craft from animals, including different clothes and armors for extra defense. There's healing items, skills, all that sort of stuff. But with every animal that you log into the Ark's index, Ken gains a stat increase by 1 across the board. And he also has the potential to gain different forms based on the animals he's gathered so far that he can use to change his stats during battle and gain new skills. This goes for Linda as well, but she's not really here right now. So in the meantime, you're only going to be caring about the stuff that goes to Ken. Now the actual battles are a little strange. They're on all 4 sides of the player, where you have to rotate around to hit certain animals. It kind of evokes the feelings of being in the wild, surrounded by creatures all around, where you don't know if you'll overpower them or they'll overpower you. It's a little bit immersive in that sense. Cause like sometimes I would stray too far outside my comfort area when I was a lower level and just get fucking mollywopped by like a bird or something. Because a meteor is actively hurtling towards your planet, there's never taking time for how many years you've got. Which in turn made me pretty stressed out for how much time that I had left, especially every time I got my ass beat it would advance the timer more and more. For a kind of punishment for losing. It's also really sudden for how the seasons change, like if you walk into a town and step back out, it's gonna suddenly just shift in the next season, and take you by surprise. The game has a tendency to have breaks in the story where you can just spend the time animal catching or grinding, and selling all the animals you catch to the merchants in the towns, bats around the planet. It is also just known as sending your animals to the slop grinder for cash. Like, hey man, like I know I gotta be saving all these animals I'm catching, but like these goats go for a lot of fucking money, man. There's something just really intriguing about the gameplay. It like stimulates one of those long forgotten parts of my brain to just keep on collecting and seeing the number of animals go up. It's the same kind of thing for why grinding can inevitably be fun even though you're just running around in circles for hours at a time. It's all about just seeing that number go up, man. It's a simple gameplay loop, sure, but it's like a gigantic scavenger hunt where it's up to you to gauge properly if you can take on stronger and stronger animals that you see. Anyways, taking the pin I put in the story out. After walking around catching animals for a couple hours with Linda in the hospital for amnesia, you get referred to venture out into the second area of the planet to go to a settlement called Eterna where the Christmas-loving green pharmaceuticals is, headed by their snobbish leader Elizabeth, where they can make a medicine for Linda's amnesia. But they took it off their production cycle because no one uses it. So naturally, you gotta walk to the other side of the area to this peninsula where these goats live to gather and make them into goat meat, as for some reason it's a primary ingredient in medicine. So with the serum crafted, you head back to the settlement where Linda's staying in Hospico to give her the memory serum, but you find her hospital bed vacant, along with a few staff members claiming they just saw you walking out with the hospital's director and Linda down to the back garden. So running out to the back of the hospital, you find the hospital director waiting outside. He asks you for a medication, so you give it to him, but just before he runs out to grab the rangers, he tells you that Linda's waiting in room 102 for you. So you trudge down this weird, dirty basement section of the hospital to room 102, and upon opening the door, you come face to face with Neck, a vacant Linda, and a dead body who Neck says is your real father who he just stabbed to death, calling him the enemy to his and your mother, which doesn't make any sense as Ken's mom explicitly said at the start of the game, but your father had already passed away, and I don't think she would want something like this to happen in the first place. Pretty soon after, rangers begin to run down to the room that you three are in. So Neck jeers cryptically to Ken, saying the party's only started, slips a knife into Linda's almost lifeless hand, bows, and vanishes into the shadows like he was never there. Thankfully, you and Linda aren't immediately pinned for that random dude that Neck just fucking killed, as after the rangers find you, you get dragged to Commander McDonald, who actually believes you as range of the story of the long-lost, psychopathic twin brother sounds. Wandering out pretty soon enough, you get a voicemail from your mom to come back home immediately. So booking it back to your mom's house, you find her and Linda. Apparently Linda used one of the Santa costumes to disguise herself as a pharmaceutical worker, and make it back to your mom's house without being caught. But you also learn that during the whole mess that Neck caused, the head doctor was able to slip Linda the memory serum. So slowly over time, Linda will become more and more like herself again. Linda also takes the time to change again into a ranger uniform, as according to the game's logic, she'll be able to slip by undetected from the few rangers still trying to look for her as long as she looks like one of them. It's a little bit confusing, I'm not gonna lie. They call it hiding in plain sight, which I guess, they're not wrong, but like, she has fucking blue hair, bro. I mean, plus she's like one of the last Beastians, so I mean like, it'd probably be like easy to find her, I'm not gonna lie. Anyways, to sum up all of that, it basically just means that Linda's in our party now. After you get Linda back in your party, the game gives you downtime to level her up, get any more creatures you forgot to get so far, and piece back parts of Linda's memories at certain optional locations. The story eventually comes back into focus when you get a call from Hume, Linda's father, to come and meet him in Parasite. If you're wondering why Hume didn't vanish along with Linda's mom, the game plays it pretty straight. Some random NPC tells you that her parents had a messy divorce. And so Hume spent the last few years just bumming around Neo-Kenya being the divorced dad guy, I guess. So walking over to Parasite and going up to the 3rd floor of the Junk Palace, which is a disheveled scrap heap maze-like hotel, we finally meet Linda's father, Hume, who's resting in his bed after he got stabbed by Neck trying to bring Linda over to Ken's mom's house. So I guess he just dragged himself over to Parasite after that. This game's story is explained weirdly, man. So after Linda and her father finally meet again after being apart, we get a call from Neck, telling us to come and meet him in Koshikata, which is another abandoned village, to play a game with him, with the prize being another vial of medicine to help Linda's memories come back faster. So, meeting Neck at the top of the church in Koshikata, he challenges you to a game of tag, where him and these random wolves that he has are the taggers. And as long as we make it back down to the bottom without dying, we win. Which sounds simple enough, I mean the wolves are really easy. So, making it back down, Neck greets us with our prize, only to reveal that he can use hypnosis to manipulate Linda into being a mindless drone which he can control, which explains that scene from earlier in room 102 for how Linda didn't seem all quite there. So he takes her away from Ken and leaves him to be torn apart by the wolves and dogs that are beginning to surround him. Luckily though, Hume comes charging in and saves Ken just before he's about to be ripped to pieces. Neck then takes the Ark for himself and flies all around Neo-Kenya, eventually stopping at Eterna. So you, Hume, and the Rangers go down there to confront Neck. Ken and Hume get there before the Rangers do, so you and him both put on Santa costumes as a disguise and split up to corner Neck on both sides. You go down to this new unlocked lab area of Elizabeth's mansion, where you come face to face with her, Neck, and her head scientist Panheim, with an expressionless Linda now clothed in a wedding dress. Elizabeth tells Neck to finish us off, but Neck snaps and stabs her in the gut, killing her almost instantly, with her reverting back to being a hag. Apparently, Elizabeth's secret side operation was sucking the body fluids of young BC women, and using them to stay forever young. She's actually the same age as Panheim, the weird scientist guy that I mentioned a second ago. Neck flees from the scene and drags Linda along with him, so you chase him up to the top floor of the mansion. You begin to fight him until a gigantic Santa Claus wearing a mask comes up right behind him and stabs Neck directly through his chest, and leaves him there to bleed out and die while he escapes off the roof of the mansion. Linda, however, is still completely under Neck's spell. So as Neck lays there bleeding out, he has a moment of understanding with Ken and relinquishes what the keyword is as the thing Linda's been dying to hear, which is pretty obviously the word love. So Ken proudly announces his love for her and kisses her to bring her back to normal, with the Rangers clapping all around them at their embrace. Now it would be kind of a historic ending if it were to end here, but you're playing Linda Cubed and a mysterious masked Santa Claus just gutted your long lost evil twin and got away, so there's still a little bit more to go. Hume still hasn't returned in the time that you and Linda have gone back to the Ranger base. So as you and the group begin to wonder, Commander McDonald gets a voicemail from an unknown messenger who's captured Hume and Linda's mom, and forces Hume to read out the ransom note while he violently beats up Anne on the phone call. And to be honest with you, it's kinda hard to listen to the audio over the phone. You're kinda left like, Jesus Christ man, alright, I get it. Luckily enough, Commander McDonald left the tracker on Hume, so we follow it all the way over to the other side of the map to this extra factory that Green Pharmaceuticals had left over. So walking in, we come face to face with the giant Santa Claus that killed Neck, and after a really short and easy boss battle, he takes off his mask to reveal himself to be Hume with Anne grafted onto his chest. But you know, clearly something is wrong with Hume as he doesn't know what's going on, and he seems to be snapping back and forth between two very different personalities. Linda's mom tries to tell us to get the fuck out of there, but Hume smashes her against his chest and starts phase 2 of his boss fight. To be totally real with you, my emulator wouldn't load the second phase for the life of it, and just fucking fell apart after every time the cutscene ended. So incredibly anticlimactically, I had to watch this guy on YouTube play for the last 20 minutes of the game. But to put that aside, after you beat Hume and the boss fight ends, he walks over to this vat of acid, affirms that although him and Linda don't look alike, she truly is his daughter, and commits suicide jumping headfirst into the acid. After Hume's death and Linda's goodbyes to her mother and her father's graves, it's finally time to launch the Ark into space. So they launch the Ark out of Neo Kenya's atmosphere only for the year to jump to 1999, and the Grim Reaper completely fucking obliterates the planet, and a disembodied voice blasts them through time and space, and they step out onto the surface of the Ark, and they watch, from my understanding, Neo Kenya become Earth, and the crust from the Grim Reaper become a new moon, formed through Earth's gravitational pull. And yeah, that's the ending of Linda Cubed Scenario A. It's pretty obvious there's still a bunch of unanswered questions, like why does Ken even have an evil long-lost twin brother? Why does Neck call Elizabeth his mom? Is the planet they find at the end of the game actually Earth? Was that dead guy actually Ken and Neck's real father? Who's Linda's real dad? And why does this random hospital lady have a character portrait all to her own? Hopefully these things will be answered in the other two routes of the game, but I really do like Linda Cubed. The game has a very unique personality and vibe to it, and it's just really cool. There's nothing else out there that's exactly like it. Finally, the last game I checked out was Mizzurna Falls, which never left Japan until a fan translation came out a few years ago in 2021, which let people outside the country play it for themselves. Something I found interesting off rip was that it was developed by Human Entertainment, the studio that did most of the Clock Tower games. This is also the only game written and directed by Taichi Chizuka, who after leaving the video game business entirely in 2004, left Japan and immigrated over to Canada to become a tour guide for the Canadian Rockies of all things. That tidbit doesn't play much into the game, I just thought it was interesting. Set in the fictional small quaint town of Mizzurna Falls in Colorado, the player character, high school senior Matthew, lives a decidedly simple life in Mizzurna, until on Christmas Day, two girls who go to his high school, Kathy and his close friend Emma, vanish during Christmas Eve night, and when Kathy is found alive that morning but mysteriously passes away just after reaching the hospital, it's up to Matthew and the townspeople of Mizzurna to discover the reasons why they disappeared, and what exactly was the cause of Kathy's death. However, as the story develops and the more you learn about the town and its issues, the narrative of what's truly going on twists and turns into something else entirely. The actual gameplay of Mizzurna Falls boils down to you going across town in your beater VW, gathering clues, figuring out the alibis and whereabouts of the townspeople on Christmas Eve night, and learning about the inner politics that go on inside Mizzurna. What makes it interesting is the ever-ticking clock that counts down the day. You only have that much time every day to find everything you need to find, and everyone in the town has their own schedule every day that they go by, which keeps them moving from place to place and event to event. Which means that if you wait or meander too long driving across town, that event closes entirely, which can totally shut down the game for you, as you now lack critical information that can develop what's happening in the story. Or it can break a development chain where since you missed this one little thing, now all of these other events and revelations will be missed out because of that one mistake. The way the schedule system worked reminded me a lot of something like Majora's Mask, to compare it to something that's much more well known, and also Shadow of Memories for the PS2 as well. What really comes to mind first for Mizzurna Falls is just how American it is for a Japanese game, even though it was made in Japan, made for a Japanese audience, and just never left the country. A lot of video essayists and articles cite Mizzurna Falls as if Twin Peaks was a video game, which in researching the game and seeing that title regurgitated so many times, makes me not want to call it that. But I do see where a lot of that idea comes from. It's just the closest thing to compare it to. Ichizuka explicitly said that he gathered inspiration from Twin Peaks, Blue Velvet, and other David Lynch works in the creation of the game. But to be honest with you, I haven't actually watched Twin Peaks or any other David Lynch thing, for that matter, so I'm probably not the best person to compare the two in a head-on discussion. Anyways, the game is honestly pretty punishing if you don't know how to spend your time valuably. Like, even to do something as simple as saving spends an hour of your time that you could put to investigation. For a more focused example, on day 1, you need to investigate and read notes in the police station on your own time to know what to do next in the order of your investigation. Especially since for reading these completely optional things, certain key places on your map just won't appear because you haven't hit that prompt. If you miss or don't know about certain things that occurred during the day or fail to catch being mentioned in passing, well then you're shit out of luck because too much time has passed already. I followed a game facts guide for the first day, for example, to record footage of the game, because I know full well I would have had zero idea what to do, which is what I learned in my first attempt after driving around town for the whole day, in confusion of what I was supposed to do, which is a shame that, for the average player, say if they weren't following the guide, would have a very incomplete experience. But that is probably the point of Mizzurna Falls' gameplay loop. It has multiple endings where Emma is or isn't found and her status is determined by what you did or didn't do to ensure her fate. You probably are supposed to fail to learn the schedules of the people around you, which also goes back to that comparison of Majora's Mask. It's too bad that in practice that can be incredibly frustrating, with Mizzurna Falls playing out over a period of 7 days rather than Majora's compact and ever repeating 3. But the stuff on display here is honestly very charming. It's very, I don't know, different for a PS1 game. It feels grounded because of its small town setting. I'm not from a small town myself, but I feel if you were, its presentation would feel rather reminiscent of that. People you see every day, a town where everybody knows everybody, lives so close but different to your own, and the community that goes with that feels real. I like how just driving around town you see other people just going about their lives as the days pass. It makes it just feel more interconnected. I'm pretty confident in saying that Mizzurna Falls probably had a shoestring budget, especially for how odd of a Japan exclusive game it is. But what they were able to make with it is just unique. I really liked what I saw. If you're still watching till the end, thank you. And I might make more of these kinda compilation or showcase types of videos. It's kinda cool to cover multiple games at once in a single video. Especially for the PS1, because there is just like tons and tons of just random ass games on that thing. That's like probably at least like 2 more videos, bro. Well, anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!